major changes in agency law. With State Senate Bill 5191, we have a considerable number of changes to protect the consumer, to make it more transparent of a process to purchase a home, including where commissions come from, also what it means to represent, for an agent like me, to represent a buyer or seller like you. So some changes that we're going to see, first on this webpage, brianhui.com/agency law, I do have a home buyer flyer made by the Northwest Malta Listing Service, which is not a National Association of Realtor affiliated database. We are owned by our own agents. There's also a Senate bill, a copy of the Senate bill if you like to read that legalese. And then there are revised forms. The new ones are out. And to my active clients that I had last year, I'll be renewing our forms for this year. For those who didn't have an agreement with me yet, just let me know whenever you want to see a home. We will need those signed before I can give you more advice beyond a buyer orientation. And so let's talk about that, why that is and everything. So there are three major components of the agency law history. One is pre-1997. In that time period, we only had representation for a seller. It wasn't until 1997 where we had more of an agency role with the buyer. The seller was represented by the seller's agent, and the buyer was represented by the selling agent. Essentially, they were still seen as someone who assisted with the sale of the listing. So this new change with State Bill 5181 is wonderful. There's more transparency, especially with, I'm going to go and scroll down to something else called a limited dual agency practice. We changed the term to limited dual agent because we wanted to make it clear to the consumers, to our clients, that we have a very limited role as a dual agent. It essentially means we can push papers. We help you fill papers out, but we cannot advocate for either side. So when someone hires us as a listing agent, it is not of their best interest to also have us represent the buyer. And to the buyer coming in, they think that they'll get a good deal. The only person getting a good deal out of this is the listing agent. That's why it was in my practice to some of my sellers, to some of my buyers too, obviously in this too, you guys have sold through me. And a few of you have gone through dual agency representation or allowed me to do so. That's because I ironed everything out already. I don't like doing it. I don't care or need the money. I care about our relationship. And so I would always try to steer away from a limited dual agency. There is also the requirement to timely disclose of conflicts of interest. There's also one thing too that's not limited to dual agency, but is a very good point right now, is the duty to disclose all compensation. So before on a listing, a buyer's agent could have gotten like a bonus that's in the confidential remarks. So as a consumer, you would never have seen it. That buyer's agent might have gotten an extra $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 bonus just for their client picking that listing to go after. And you would just think that agent might have still only gotten about 3%. Now we have to disclose of all commissions. So if there's that 3% and $7,000, we will tell the buyer that we made X amount of money. That's huge. And that worked the other way too. In 2021, we saw fierce competition amongst buyers. And sometimes buyers would also not just pay for the seller's closing costs, but also to try to sweeten the deal, would pay the listing agent additional commission. So the buyer was trying to buy the seller and buy the listing agent. And now it has to be disclosed to everybody. The seller needs to know that their agent was bribed. So that is a very good change, in my opinion. And you'll see my opinion too on this page, a little blurb that I wrote out about what I think about this. Again, because in my industry, at least when we talk to each other, most people are pretty upset about this. I think one major reason is because we have to, here it is in bold, a firm must enter into written service agreement with the principal, which is a buyer or seller, before or as soon as reasonably practical after commencing broker services. So let's say if you met me at an open house and we want to continue this client brokerage relationship, I would need you signing documents before we can go out and look at homes. When I do the buyer orientation, That's when we can chat more about this. That is why I'll be sending out new agreements out to everybody. I know you guys have all signed them last year, but we'll be having them signed again. To my sellers, there's going to be no change, except for one thing, which makes it easier for us. Instead of having to wait until it's 30 days before the listing to do all of our paperwork, we can actually start doing it 90 days prior now. As many of you know, it takes, it could take up to 6 months to prepare a home for sale. So now I can legally give you advice 3 months prior to the actual listing. So that's a wonderful change as well. But otherwise, nothing really changes on the seller side. We have never forced a seller to pay a commission to the buyer's agent. A lot of times it is still advised. And one example of why it could be advised is simply because if that person needs the cash to pay a down payment, they're not going to be able to pay their buyer's agent out of pocket. That's one of the biggest issues. And you might think, oh, well, that buyer can just roll it into their loan. But sometimes they can't even do that with their normal closing costs. Let's say on a $1 million home, they have $10,000 in closing costs. It's going to be difficult for many people to find an additional $20,000, $30,000, $35,000 to pay their agent. If a seller does elect to not have a commission, part of the changes in the buyer agency agreement is selecting if a buyer wants their agent to even show them or even search for homes that have no commission. So with no commission, sellers, you might simply not have your home seen or be seen as an option. I'll advise you if there is any changes in the industry or to lending practices. But for the time being, we still need to appraise, and the bank is going to loan how much it appraises for. So thank you guys so much for your time. Look out for my signing requests to my active clients. And to those who aren't active, please let me know how and when I may serve you. All right, thanks, guys.